I thought the Buffalo Bills already looked like morons for firing Sean McDermott, but somehow on Wednesday, it got even worse. We'll break it down on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso, with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome into the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, the Data Queen, Michelle Majuk. On today's episode, we're going to talk about our X factors in the NFL's Conference Championship weekend. The Denver Broncos must run the ball to protect Jarrett Stidham. Matthew Stafford's clutch factor will come in clutch. But first, we got to talk with the Buffalo Bills absolutely embarrassing themselves even more on Wednesday. Before we dive in, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. And thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. It is Crossover Thursday, and Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Michelle, I don't know about you, but when the Buffalo Bills fired Sean McDermott, my first thought was they fired the wrong guy. It should have been Brandon Beane, because I know Sean McDermott had his downfalls. He wasn't perfect. But to me, the roster was a way bigger problem for the Bills than the coaching was.
I don't know if I think that's true, right? And I think both are above average. I do. And I think there's something there where it's just like they either have really bad luck. I mean, they're always losing by 3 points, right? They got kicked out of the playoffs 3 straight years in a row in a 3-point game. It's just like when it comes to the end, and they just can never win an overtime either. I don't think Josh Allen has ever won an overtime game in his career, if I'm correct. And it's so difficult with this loss because it's like, okay, yeah, some of it has to be put blame on Allen, right? And that's normally not the case. Mm-hmm. There was a couple fumbles lost there. But also at the same time, McDermott is supposed to be a defensive guy, and your defense falls apart every single playoff. And you can't always allow the opponent to score 30 points, right? It happens every time that the Bills lose in a playoff game. The defense is putting up so many points, and the Bills will still put up 30 points and lose. So I kind of get having to move on from McDermott. I don't, because what was going to be the message this year from McDermott and this team to try to get this team to care and to keep focusing and saying we actually have a shot? Like, I don't know how many times you can say the same message over and over and over and the team actually believe.
And I think that's a fair point. What I would also say, though, to point to the roster, they have never had an elite pass rusher. They have been unable to get an elite pass rusher on the roster also. I think some of the biggest issues this season with Buffalo and in that loss to Denver were they did not have outside wide receiver talent. He's throwing to Brandon Cooks, who could have made a catch on the sideline late in the game that would have really helped and wasn't able to pull it down. They just don't have enough talent on the outsides at wide receiver after they trade away Stephon Diggs. They were never able to make that up. I think that's a big factor for me as well. But I think there's an argument to be made based on everything you said about McDermott and everything I said about the roster that maybe both guys are at fault. And that's why it was a surprise to my guy Joe Marino from Locked On Bills that Sean McDermott went and Brandon Beane didn't.
The Bills became just the 4th team in the history of the NFL to win a playoff game in at least 6 consecutive years. The other 3 teams had 3 Super Bowl wins to show for it, and the Bills haven't even gotten there. I certainly understand that you can't just pick up the pieces and try again next year. Something needed to change. There needed to be a shakeup. But consider me very surprised that shakeup is Sean McDermott, especially because Brandon Beane stays.
See, I think that the argument could be if you want to change things up, maybe both those guys need to go at once. It's crazy because Sean McDermott got hired vouched for Brandon Beane, got him hired the next year, and then ultimately Beane outlasted him. And what makes it even worse, Michelle, is Terry Pegula, the owner of the Buffalo Bills, and Brandon Beane, the general manager, sat down for a press conference on Wednesday and absolutely embarrassed themselves. Terry Pegula stopped the press conference and stopped Brandon Beane during a question, said that it was the coaching staff that wanted Keon Coleman, and that he said Brandon Beane was just being a good teammate. You know what I mean? And basically said that it was entirely the coaching staff's fault that Keon Coleman was drafted. Now, number one, Keon Coleman is still on the team. Like, how do you feel if you're Keon Coleman going into, I know that he's been a disappointment so far, but man, to talk about him like that when he's still on your roster, he probably won't be on the roster for very long, but now it's coming out after the fact. All of these quotes from Brandon Beane when he did media with the Buffalo Bills saying, quote, I went to bed that night saying it's Keon unless someone blows us away. Another quote, barring someone offering us something stupid, we'll take Keon. Keon Coleman was his pick. It wasn't like, guys don't say that sort of stuff when they didn't want a guy and go out on the limb and say that. So Buffalo just looks like a complete embarrassment. And when you look at, they're trying to get a new head coach. If you're a head coach, I know Buffalo's a good option and a good team and Josh Allen, but don't you got to be hesitant with how the owner and the general manager have treated Sean McDermott at this point?
I mean, the owner for sure, right? You're a little skeptical about what he's saying
like,
today.
Whoa.
And it is crazy to be throwing out Keon Coleman's name like that when he's still on your team, and also saying, like, you're saying all the guys in the room had say, like, you're interviewing Joe Brady, who that would mean he was a big part of that too, right?
Right.
So that whole thing is weird. I want to back up Brandon Beane a little bit, though. Yeah, there's been some misses in Keon Coleman, right? And people are like, they should have just stayed and taken Xavier Worthy. Yeah, I mean, he would have been better than Coleman, but it's not like
he's not that good, though.
He's not that good either. It's not like they missed out on a Justin Jefferson in this draft, like the Eagles did with taking Jalen Reagor over Jefferson, right? Like, it's not that bad. And there's been a couple misses with the Elam pick in 2022 in the first round, but he has found a lot of good talent that's been extremely impressive for this team later in the draft. Matt Milano in the 5th round, even getting Deion Dawkins in the 2nd round in that same draft. Obviously, he's the one that took Josh Allen. That was a early first rounder, but you have Dane Jackson in the 7th round, Gabe Davis in the 4th, DeMar Hamlin in the 6th, Spencer Brown in the 3rd round, Christian Benford in the 6th round, Khalil Shakir in the 5th round, Terrell Benford in the 3rd round. I mean, these are really big impact players that he's finding in the 3rd round or later in draft after draft after draft. That's not a thing that a lot of GMs do.
Yeah, that's a fair point too. That's a fair point, which is why I think a lot of people in Buffalo were like, if you're going to fire one of them, fire both of them together because they're kind of a package unit. But you look at the candidates that you mentioned, some of them, Joe Brady, the current offensive coordinator, which again would feel weird that they kind of crapped on the offensive coaching staff for the Keon Coleman situation, but yet you want to hire a guy who is on that coaching staff. I think same thing, bringing Brian Dable back, who is a candidate right now. Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense for me either. You're going to bring back a guy who was a part of a group that couldn't get you over the hump and then went and proved that he may not be a very good head coach in New York. Anthony Lynn is a guy who they are going to have interest in. Grant Udinski, who is the offensive coordinator, the 30-year-old offensive coordinator from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator from the Colts. Anthony Weaver, the defensive coordinator of the Miami Dolphins. Out of all of those names, who do you think makes the most sense for Buffalo?
None of them. I can't believe they didn't go all out for Robert Saleh. I think that would have been the best pick there. I really don't know what route makes sense. I know the Brian Dable one doesn't make sense to me. Going with any guy that struggled previously, like, what was I trying to think of here? Well, people were like, well, they should have, John Harbaugh should have waited out, right? And he could have got the Bills job.
Right.
It's like, that's the whole reason the Ravens got rid of John Harbaugh, because he can't get over the hump. So like, you almost have to go with a younger guy, right? If that's your focus, is to get different, be creative here, you almost have to go the younger guy route that hasn't already failed as a head coach.
And you know who isn't the younger route? Anthony Lynn and Lou Anarumo. Like, I'm sorry, that doesn't make any sense to me. I think out of this group, I think they're probably going to promote Joe Brady. I think that's actually what the end game here is, because Brady is a guy who's gotten some interest around the NFL in head coaching positions and probably will eventually get a head coaching opportunity. But Udinski is 30 years old. I'm sorry, he may be up and coming, but when you're at the position the Buffalo Bills are, you cannot go to a 30-year-old head coach. I think that Anthony Weaver maybe could make some sense as a defensive guy who's kind of young and up and coming, but I think you're right. Buffalo is in just a weird spot now. There was another hire in the NFL on Tuesday night, and it was Mike McDaniel going to the Los Angeles Chargers. I think this is an excellent move by the Chargers, not only because McDaniel is a good coach and a good offensive coach at that, but because it shows that Jim Harbaugh is taking this serious, not just hiring someone he's comfortable with. And our guys over at Locked On Chargers were pretty excited about the news.
They did it. They landed their guy. Yes, indeed. Mike McDaniel is going to be the new offensive coordinator for the Chargers. And finally, Justin Herbert has some real hope. He really does. And for the Chargers, their offense has real hope, right? It was one thing to let go of Greg Roman. It's another thing to go and hire Mike McDaniel as someone who we just didn't know if Jim Harbaugh would hire. And those are kind of the levels to this, right? Jim Harbaugh doing whatever it takes to win. The Chargers obviously doing right by Justin Herbert and giving him an offensive coordinator that is worthy of his talents.
If you were Mike McDaniel and you had the Chargers, the Buccaneers, the Eagles, the Titans offensive coordinator jobs available, or the Browns, the Raiders coaching jobs, head coaching jobs available, what would you have chosen?
I would have definitely gone with the OC, one of those OC jobs, either, the Buccaneers or the Chargers or the Eagles. Like, the Eagles give you the best chance of getting to the Super Bowl probably, but I really like him going to LA. It just seems to, just location alone, it fits his personality, right?
Herbert's the best quarterback too.
Yeah, Herbert's the best quarterback among that bunch. And I love that he's like, no, I'm not going to go take a head coaching job with another terrible team, because if I fail again, I'm done, right? Let me go to a good team. Let me show off my skill set as an OC. Then I can get one of the top-notch job openings if they were to open again, if I can prove my worth.
I totally agree with you, and I think that the Chargers would probably be my number 2, but I think that Tampa Bay might have been a better option. They have a ton of weapons on offense. I think Baker Mayfield can play in a similar system as Tua, where he's getting the ball out quick, hitting the back foot, being accurate, and I think one more year and Todd Bowles is out, and then if you're Mike McDaniel, you might be able to just slide in and take over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers job in an easier division, still in Florida, which maybe wouldn't be a big move for him, in a climate that he feels comfortable in, fits his sensibilities as well. So I think Tampa Bay was another good option. But again, Justin Herbert was the better quarterback. I can't blame Mike McDaniel for making that move. But again, we do have the conference championship weekend in the NFL coming up. We're going to hit these games and talk about what we think the X factor in these matchups could be. Do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Now, you could put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action. So when the momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now, I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. You can trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission, merchant, and swap firm. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. The NFL playoffs are in full swing, and there's nothing like being at the game, the crowd noise, the energy, cheering alongside other fans. Watching at home is great, but being in the stadium hits different. The frustrating part has always been getting tickets, waiting in queues, dealing with logins, and watching prices change right at checkout. That's why the Game Time app gives the advantage back to fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing NFL tickets and experiences in just a few taps. I buy all my tickets on Game Time because they have the best features in the industry, a panoramic view from your seat, zone deals. They have all fees included up front, so the price you see is exactly what you pay, and it's all backed by the Game Time guarantee. Take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDON NFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today and get back to being there live. All right, Michelle, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about the embarrassment in Buffalo, a good move by the Chargers to hire Mike McDaniel, but now we got to dive into the weekend of games ahead. We got two matchups in each conference, the conference championship games, to see who will go to the big one in February. And we need to talk about what actually could make the difference in this game. And I look at the Los Angeles Rams, and I have liked the Rams all season long, Michelle. They've been my Super Bowl favorite since probably Halloween or something like that. I just trust the quarterback-coach combination. I'm a big fan of Jared Verse, Chris Shula, and what he's done on defense. But they lost to Seattle in a big-time game. Last time they played 38-37, and they found a way to beat the Bears because Matthew Stafford came through in the clutch. And I have a feeling that the X factor for the Rams is going to be that quarterback advantage, and they're going to need Stafford to come through in the clutch again. And that's something that our guys over at Locked On Rams talked about this week.
When he got that ball back, I think every Rams fan was thinking, yeah, okay, we're going to go win the game right now. I think every guy on the Rams team thought, okay, we're going to go win the game right now. That doesn't happen very often. There's only a very small handful of teams that I think feel that way about their quarterback. You know, maybe it's Josh Allen, maybe it's, Patrick Mahomes is certainly on that list. There's some other guys, maybe one or two more, but Matthew Stafford, when he has the ball in his hands with a chance to go win the game, will, or at least you feel like he will, and gives your chance a team to go and do what they did last night.
I saw a great video of Sean McVay right before overtime saying, hey, anything that's happened before doesn't matter. Be in the moment. Go out and win. And I think having Sean McVay, a Super Bowl winning coach, and having Matthew Stafford, a Super Bowl winning quarterback, and a guy who I think is probably going to win MVP, I think that does give the Rams hope in any situation, where on the other side, the Seahawks have been really good. There's no doubt about it. But in those critical moments, are they going to have the same kind of confidence that we see the Rams have in Stafford and McVay? I'm not certain. Matthew Stafford threw for 475 yards and 3 touchdowns the last time these two teams played. I think that the Rams are going to find a way to win this game, and I think Stafford and McVay are the reason why I believe it.
Yeah, Stafford's going to have to show up big time, and they're going to have to score early, because it can't be one of those where they're struggling to start and then they get going in the second half, because they need to make Sam Darnold feel any pressure. I'm not talking about like pass rush pressure. I'm talking about actual physical pressure.
Game pressure.
Make it a close game, because that's when Sam Darnold falls apart. Instantly, I knew last week when the Seahawks went up 17-0 or whatever it was, instantly when they scored the touchdown, and then the refs decided, a defense can call a timeout mid-play. That's fine after a ball is thrown. I guess that's a new rule. As soon as that all happened, I was like, Sam Darnold has no pressure on him now. That's when he shines, because he can be a good quarterback, and I knew the 49ers were going to get their butts kicked from that moment on. The Rams cannot let that happen. Do not let him get comfortable, and you'll be fine. But I will say this is just the 7th playoff matchup over the last 50 years between the NFL leader in passing yards against the number 1 defense in the league in points per game allowed. The defense, the number 1 defense, won in all 6 of the previous matchups. So the quarterback went down all of those.
Isn't it crazy that any time, like in recent memory, we've seen like, oh, this great offense. It reminds me of like the Seattle Seahawks when they absolutely mauled in the Super Bowl. It's like no matter what it seems like, if you have an elite level defense, that's going to beat an elite level offense. It's just going to beat it. I don't know why it ends up working that way. Defense wins championships, as everybody says, right? But that stat right there that you just dropped, that does make me feel very, very nervous, because a defense can just overwhelm any kind of offense if they want. But on the other side of the ball, I think the Seahawks offense against the Rams defense is going to be an X factor as well. And specifically, I think the run game for the Seattle Seahawks is going to be critical, and it's going to be even more difficult now because they are not going to have Zach Zach Charbonnet, who tore his ACL and is going to be out. And that puts a lot of pressure on Kenneth Walker to be the tone setter for the Seattle Seahawks, as our guys over at Locked On Seahawks talked about this week.
I don't know that we've ever seen Ken Walker be the tone setter. It's normally the guys up front, and he certainly can be the electric player with his ability to hit a home run anytime he touches the football. But the energy and the aggressiveness that he played with tonight, I really felt like K9 was the aggressor for the Seahawks, particularly when they were just packing onto that lead in the second half. They didn't really take their foot off the pedal. It was on the entire game. Let's put our foot down in the throat and let's make it that this is an absolute annihilation. And he was a big
And he's going to have to be a big part of it again. They ran for 170 yards against the Rams in that last matchup that we talked about. They ran for 175 yards last week against San Francisco. I think that is what takes the pressure off of Sam Darnold. If the Rams let Kenneth Walker get going, they're not going to win because that's too much to overcome. The defensive talent and then the run game going, it just makes it too easy for the Seahawks operation.
Yeah, it's been 4 straight games now that the Seahawks have had at least 160 rushing yards in that game. And without Zach Charbonnet, that could hurt around the goal line for sure. Like, he's been fantastic around there. But Kenneth Walker really stepped up last week when he went down, had 116 rushing yards, was highly efficient, over 9 yards a carry, I believe. And then 3 rushing touchdowns. And then also, I mean, in that Rams game in week 16, he had 164 scrimmage yards in that game to have that win. Second most scrimmage yards in a game in his career. So he's had the Rams number over 100 yards in each of the last 3 games against the Rams. He could do it without Charbonnet, but it'll be interesting what Kyron Williams and Blake Corum can do as a duo on the other side to try to, eliminate that suffrage from whatever Kenneth Walker can do.
And the Rams are a confusing run defense to me. They were 12th in the NFL in rushing yards allowed, which is in theory good. You're pretty close to the top 10 in the NFL, but they just have these blow up games. Like since week 11, 135 to Seattle in the first matchup, even though they won. 123 to Tampa Bay, 164 to Carolina. Then they only give up 51 to Arizona, only 70 to Detroit. That's pretty good. But then the 171 to Seattle, 219 in their loss to the Atlanta Falcons. Then they get to play the Cardinals again, who suck, and they get a 79. They play the Panthers again, and they find a way to change the narrative there, cut that rushing total in half, and only give up 83. But then 160 on the ground by the Chicago Bears last week. It's like, they're Jekyll and Hyde, and it seems like when they play bad teams, they play good run defense. But when they do play good teams, they play terrible run defense. So that does have me a little worried for the Rams.
Yeah, and Kenneth Walker can be one of those guys that loses a bunch of yards on like 10 straight runs, right? And the breaks went off for 80. Or, he did impress me last week. He looked much better. So if he could be consistent, that's what he needs to be in this game. Don't, because there's too many 3 and outs when Walker he's dancing. Struggling. Yeah, so just go forward. You don't got to dance. Just get the 3-4 yards, and then you can still break some off. You could break 1 or 2 off in the game. But I think this is going to be an incredibly close game, and it's going to come down to, I think fully it's going to come down to if the Rams can put any mental pressure onto Sam Darnold.
Yeah, if the game is close at the end, even though they pulled it off last time, with it being the playoffs, with it being all the marbles, all the pressure right now, in my opinion, is on Seattle because they dominated last week. People are talking about them like they're the favorite. They're a buzzsaw. They're going to cut through the NFL. Who's going to stop them in the AFC? This and that. I think there is more mental pressure on the Seahawks just naturally. So if you can crank that up to 11, it'll give you a good chance to see if Sam Darnold, if the pipes burst a little bit. But we move to the AFC, where the game isn't quite as interesting, but there are certainly X factors to discuss all the same. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. If you ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. If I needed to hire someone for this show, which luckily I don't because I have the best co-hosts in the world, I would go straight to Indeed and be very specific about what I need, real experience, not just a resume buzzword. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions do apply. Today's episode is also brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employment forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents to go about your day and get updates right in the TurboTax app. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert doesn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. All right, Michelle, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about the Bills embarrassing themselves. We talked about our X factors in the NFC Conference Championship game between the Seahawks and the Rams. Now we need to move over to the AFC, where again, look, the reality is with the Bo Nix news, this game doesn't quite have the pop that we were hoping it would have. But with that in mind, the Denver Broncos, if they have any chance to win this game, they have to run the football and protect their backup quarterback, Jared Stidham. And something that may help the Denver Broncos run the football is the potential return of JK Dobbins, as my guy Cody Roark from Locked On Broncos talked about this week.
The Denver Broncos are opening the 21-day window for running back J.K. Dobbins, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee a return for the NFL playoffs. J.K. Dobbins, it was announced here today, first reported by Adam Schefter, that J.K. Dobbins, the Broncos, were going to be opening up his 21-day practice window, which means he's going to step foot on the practice field more than likely on Wednesday, and that gives the team 21 days to essentially move him off of injured reserve to the active roster, or else he stays on IR for the remainder of the year. But that gives the Broncos flexibility because they have the AFC Championship game this weekend against the New England Patriots. If they win, they'll have a week in between Super Bowl 60 to be able to continue to ramp him up a little bit and maybe open the window for him to return. But at this point in time, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be ready to play on Sunday against New England. We'll have to see how the practice week unfolds for him as he returns after having Liz Frank surgery following the injury he suffered in Week 10. We'll keep you posted here every step of the way. Locked On Broncos.
I'm not going to act like J.K. Dobbins is Derrick Henry or Bijan Robinson or something like that. He's a massive difference maker, but Buffalo needs all the help that they can get. I mean, they won that game last week against the Bills, but they only ran for 70 yards. And you look at New England's run defense, after a tough end to the season stretch, they really turned it around starting in Week 18 with the Miami Dolphins. 63 yards to the Dolphins, 87 yards to the Chargers in the wild card round, 48 yards allowed to the Texans. Again, the Broncos only ran for 70 yards last week against Buffalo, and we know that Buffalo's run defense has been mostly terrible for most of the year. So I'm looking at that matchup, and I'm wondering, RJ Harvey only had, 20 yards rushing. Jaleel McLaughlin had 21 yards. Bo Nix led the Denver Broncos with 29 rushing yards. He's not going to be there. Stidham can't run like that. If Denver can't run the football, it's over. Now, they probably don't have a good shot anyway, but it is 100% over if they can't find a way to run the football.
I think you called the Broncos Buffalo twice there, but
twice, yeah. I got Buffalo. I wish it were Buffalo. That's the problem.
Oh
what a disgrace. I wish it were Buffalo. That's a Freudian slip by me.
Stupid
I
Brandon
know,
Cooks
man.
not be able to come. Like, we can blame the refs too because it was such a. I don't know. What
I hated those calls. Let them
everything.
play, man.
They
Let
were
them
letting
play.
them play all game, and if you
Yup.
didn't call it all game, then you called it in overtime. But then also the whole interception, not interception thing. Like, I think that whole world, besides Denver, or Broncos fans elsewhere, want this game to be the Bills.
Broncos country.
Ugh, like no, this I cannot think of a worse AFC Championship game in I don't even know how long. I'm not excited for this game whatsoever. It doesn't mean the Broncos can't win, but also we don't even want that either. I don't want to see Jarrett Stidham in the Super Bowl.
Right.
Like, no. This is my thing with RJ Harvey. Yeah, he's just not a very good overall runner, right? At least not yet in his career.
He's just okay.
I don't know if Dobbins can come back already. We'll see if he can. But yeah, that would be huge. But the Patriots, like you said, their run defense has been much better. It's because they got Milton Williams back. And with him on the field, they're such a better run team. I think what will be key for the Broncos is to actually make their sacks matter. Because Drake May is going to get sacked a ton of times in this game, right? The Broncos led the league in sacks this year. Drake May.
And Will Campbell has been struggling. Like, their left tackle, there are people talking like, hey, this is why we said this dude needs to be a guard at the NFL level. He cannot handle the edge. Like, he can't, and he's had some trouble.
He's allowed the 4th highest sack rate among all left tackles this year. And Nick Bonito typically lines up against the left tackle. So that's going to be fun. And then also Zach Wilson's going to get to line up against Jared Wilson, who's allowed the highest sack rate among all left guards this year. And Allen typically lines up right around that area. So they're going to get to him. But Drake May has already faced the top 2 of the top 3 defensive sacks this year in Cleveland and Atlanta. He got sacked 6 times in both of those games. So 12 times, it didn't matter. His numbers were still amazing. He averaged a 70 completion percentage, over 10 passing yards per attempt. He had 118 passer rating. They won both of those games, right? But what the Broncos need to do is make May make mistakes during those sacks, right? Get those forced fumbles, get him to throw some stupid balls, and then that's how the Broncos can win. I think that's actually more of an X factor than JK Dobbins coming back.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, their defense is going to have to absolutely dominate, but if they're going to do anything on offense, at minimum, you can keep the Patriots offense off the field to limit their scoring, and then when your defense is out there, absolutely dominate them. That is their path. But I got to say, speaking of a path, I mean, the Patriots' path is their X factor. Like, they have had just the craziest luck of all time. But you know what? My guy Nick Cattles from Locked On Patriots says, so what?
If you get to the Super Bowl and you had a tough path, do you walk in with 6 points on the scoreboard? Like, you don't get extra points for the path that you took to get to a championship game or a championship series. It's all nonsense. You play who you play, you beat who you beat, and if you survive and advance, then you survive and advance. That's how it happens.
I mean, that is the reality. Nobody is going to look back too much and say, you know, the Patriots did this and that. They make it to the Super Bowl and win. They're going to celebrate a Super Bowl championship. And although they've had an easy path, no path in the NFL is fully easy. It's still NFL games, but let's not pretend like the X factor for the Patriots isn't in this game isn't just the fact that they get to face a backup quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair what he said. Like, it doesn't matter the path you take. I will say, we can bring up the Rams path too if they win. I mean, this is their first hard game, right? The Panthers and the Bears, I feel like, are easier paths to get to the NFC Championship than normal. And then let's say they win this game. I mean, it'd be hard for them not to be the favorites in the Super Bowl, no matter which of these 2 teams win.
The NFC is going to be the favorite. There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, it would take, like, the stadium would have to get hit by a meteor for the AFC to be a favorite in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just not a fun last 4 teams, I don't think, in my opinion.
Michelle, it always goes this way. If we get a great playoffs early on, we get stinkers at the end. It's just, we can never get greatness all the way through. Either we have bad games early and then the great teams are left and the ending games are good, or we have a lot of parity early on because none of the teams are all that great. And then we get to the end and we realize, oh, there's a couple of teams that aren't that great that are still in the mix. So I feel like it's just no way around it, and that's the way that it has to be. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. I am your host, the Madman, Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, the Data Queen, Michelle Majuk, as we tell you every single episode. Thanks for tuning in. Stay safe out there.
Bye, y'all.